so the potometer. The potometer, as I said in an earlier video, is a tool for measuring the rate of transpiration. So anytime you want to, you guys see that? Anytime you're talking about setting up an experiment with the potometer, you want to make sure that you're also talking about the time over which something is happening, because it's a rate, right? So it's how much transpiration is happening per unit time, okay? There are two types of potometers. The first one here is just a regular potometer. The second one that I've shown down here is a little bit simpler perhaps, and it's often called a mass potometer because it's literally looking at the loss of mass over a certain rate of time. Okay, so let's talk about the top one first. So you can see you have your plant here, okay, and it's in water. So all of this here is water. And then I hope you can see this. There's a little bubble right here in a capillary tube that has measurement markings on it. All right, this up here is called the reservoir. Okay, this I said is the capillary tube. All right, and so and this is, so you have to make sure that this is sealed tight because you don't want any. The idea is that both of the potometers are set up so that the only water loss you are getting is through the leaves. It's only the transpiration. So you have to make sure that this is sealed so that you don't get any water that's evaporating just from the top of the test tube. Okay, or down here you have the bag. It's the same idea that the bag prevents water loss from the soil. So the only water that you are losing is coming directly from the leaves, is a transpiration. Okay, and so the idea is that you can set up several different things. So I mentioned 4 factors that affect the rate of transpiration, and so you could for using the potometer, you could test the effect of light intensity or humidity or wind speed or temperature, any of those things on the rate of transpiration. All right, and so you would do that by, you would have perhaps a fan here going at different speeds, or if you wanted to do light intensity, you would have a light at different distances away from the plant. Okay, lots of different possibilities for this. And then you would set a certain amount of time. So for example, after an hour or after 15 minutes, you would check to see how far the bubble in the capillary tube has moved. Okay, so there's a little bubble there. And in that way, you can then see how much water loss there has been from the leaves due to transpiration, and then you would divide that by the amount of time that you've let the experiment run. The point of the reservoir is that if you want to run the experiment again, you simply open this here, and that moves the bubble back, so it resets the experiment. Similar to the experiment that we had with the little colored bubble in your mock, and most of you understood that you had the that was for air, not water, but it's the same idea, is that this is basically allows you to reset the experiment. Okay, the mass spectrometer is a very similar thing. So this would be a control for the mass spectrometer. By the way, it just has no plant. So this is how you would do a control for the mass spectrometer. And so for the mass spectrometer, you still have the plant. You have a bag to prevent any loss of water from the soil. Okay. And then you have a balance. And the idea is that, again, after a certain amount of time, you set the amount of time, you just look to see what is the difference in mass. And you are assuming that all of the loss of mass is due to the water loss from the leaves. So that's the mass spectrometer. This one is perhaps a little easier to understand. This one looks a little stranger. The other thing they love to ask about with potometer questions is they really like to talk about things you need to be careful of when you're setting up here. Okay, so one of the things is that when you cut this piece of plant, you want to make sure that you cut the plant underwater, and you want to do that because if you don't, if there's a water bubble that's introduced into the xylem itself of the plant, then you won't get any transpiration. The water cannot move through the plant. Okay, so this bubble here in the capillary tube needs to be the only one you're using. Or the only bubble that is anywhere in the system. You want to make sure that this is sealed. That's important as well, so they don't get any water loss. So this is something that they like to ask about, kind of all the possible ways you might be able to mess it up. And so you want to make sure that these are things that you understand and can talk about.